Good evening. I'd like to call to order this what should be a special town council meeting on the budget for Tuesday, April 18th, 2023. Please rise for a moment of silence. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Allenson, Carmody, Fishbein, Laffin, Marone,
Here.
Tata,
Here.
Testa, Zandri,
Here.
and Chairman Simoni.
Here. So under our charter, this is technically not a proper meeting because we do not have a quorum. However, in the interest of not punishing the present and prompt, and because we are taking no action tonight, we are going to go forward. I'm going to go through the agenda in order. Do we have representatives from Public Celebrations? Does anybody in the council have questions? Thank you for visiting us, Ms. Gallagher. Have a good evening. Representatives from the library. We have questions for the library? Thank you for visiting with us. We'll see you next time. Economic Development Commission. We have representative. Mr. Mira, it's always nice to see you too. Great results at this meeting, right? The Veterans Services Center, we have a representative. And we have no questions. Major, thank you for visiting with us. We must have questions for the Senior Center, no? Mr. Viola, thanks for making the trip. I'm sorry you sat down again. Parks and Recreation. I'm checking twice. Thank you for visiting. Okay. Wallingford Center, Inc. Please come visit it with us. You have a taker. And once you pretend to make yourselves comfortable, please let us know who you are for the record.
For the record, I'm Jeffrey Knickerbocker. I'm the president of the WCI.
Welcome.
I'm Marge Avignar, I'm the treasurer.
Welcome.
Liz Davis, executive director.
Thank you all for coming. Councilor Tata.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening.
Good evening.
I have a couple questions. So if it's okay, I know the Wallingford Center Inc. and the WCI Capital and Facade are one after another, but I know it's all you. On line 58223, which is WCI Capital and Streetscape Improvements, so it looks like the request was $40,000, which was approved by the mayor, but it looks like so far in this current budget you've only spent $857. And I'm just wondering, if that money is not expended in a budget year, what happens to that? Because I believe, unlike a regular department, that money wouldn't go back to the general fund because we've distributed that money to you. So what would happen if that doesn't get expended?
Me or you? Okay. It's going to get spent. I have a bill here for brand new wreaths for all of the lights. That will come up just to be about $40,000 if all of them replace. Right now, Public Works looked at it, liked it. They need to put it on a light and get approval from, excuse me, Electric Division. Once that takes place, purchase will take place before our year end, which is June. So we're going to spend it,
Okay,
is the short answer.
perfect. And then, so I assume for next year, same thing, you anticipate that you would spend the entire 40,000?
So far, what we've talked about, what we have slotted is different seasonal things for, we haven't updated the flags in a long time. We need American flags. We go down Quinnipiac Street now. So that will be spent also.
Okay. And then I might as well bring it up. I bring it up every year. The new wreaths, are they replacing the snowflakes, or we still have the
The
snowflakes?
snowflakes are going.
If I've
Miss
if I've
Landau will
accomplished
be
nothing else
sad.
as a counselor. All right,
I'm going to make a note that you don't like snowflakes.
No, she didn't like them.
I'm going to miss the snowflakes.
you never have to hear me complain again.
That I'm not going to miss.
All right, so moving on, let's see. Oh, I guess I would have the same question about the facade program. So it looks like 15,000 is the request, and then this year it looks like you've spent about 4,600 so far. So what would happen with that money if you don't spend it? Does that get set aside in like an account for the facade that would carry forward, or what would happen with that?
Well, right now, none of it's restricted as to use. We ask for it, and it would depend upon the merchants, right, Liz?
Councilor Tata, that money would go back to the general fund.
General fund.
They only get reimbursed. They have to give us invoices, we pay them.
Perfect, okay, thank you.
And can I just interject something?
Oh, sure.
So, right up until June, all that money will be spent.
Okay.
So just so you know.
We had kind of a different year this year.
You might want to get closer to that mic.
Yeah, we had kind of a different year this year. So that's why we're towards the end of the year catching up. You probably saw some articles in the paper and things like that, but we're back to business as usual.
Okay. And then my only other question, oh, actually, I'm sorry, I have two more. So I'm looking at your P&L that you submitted. So it looks like for Celebrate Wallingford, the expenses are about $40,500. Does Public Celebrations get involved with that, or if they don't, is there a desire to have them involved, or no, or this is just something that you do on your own?
That has always been a separate piece, and they've usually coincided with the holiday stroll. So they could get involved in it, yes.
Yeah, I don't want to sit here and say that we're going to turn away help. If
Yeah.
somebody comes to me
Right.
with an idea and says that we should do this, then we're going to look to do it. So they don't traditionally assist, but
But for the holiday stroll, they do, so
Yes.
that's.
So we help
better.
each
Okay.
other as best we can, and then there's always, we were just talking about that, Gallagher and I we want to sit down and brainstorm about that.
Yeah.
So,
Okay,
yeah.
great.
yeah, that event brings in Parks and Rec and a number of different organizations.
Yeah, that's true. And my only other question is just the digital marketing line, it looks like it's $20,450. What exactly, and I don't think you're asking the town, well, I guess it could be some of the town money spent on that, but what exactly is that used for?
You know, we've been having a slew of businesses comment to us about how thankful they are for our post. It's been bringing in business to the Wallingford Center. And in order to do that, I don't know if you can tell that we're a little older. We're not as good on the social media as other generations might be. So we actually have picked up for lack of a better word, a contractor to assist us with that. And so that's basically a personnel expense.
So the TV crew is telling me that you're not close enough to the mic. You can pull it forward.
What I've done is I've got all these papers in front of me, and it's kind of messed things up.
Okay, so that's an independent contractor, not an employee? Okay. All right, that's all I have. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So is the contractor's social media age appropriate?
She is, yes.
She's younger than we are.
Well, you know, we don't discriminate based on age. If an older person came and had...
Even if it's out of necessity.
I wanted...
So we hit both WCI and the Capital Facade Improvement Program. Any questions from the public? Thanks for hanging out with us.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Thank you.
Next up is the Historic Program Match. Any questions for the Historic Program Match? You skate on that one, Mr. Farrell. Center Street Cemetery.
Timing.
Any questions for the Center Street Cemetery? No?
Did we get the budget that you requested?
We got information. Mr. Glidden, are you here for Columbus House? No, okay. So the council has no questions for the Center Street Cemetery. On to Columbus House. Any questions for Columbus House from the council? The council has no questions. SCOW. Does the council have questions for SCOW? Please come visit with us.
Hello.
Hello, welcome. Please remind us who you are for the record.
Adriana Rodriguez, Executive Director.
Jeffrey Necchio, Board Chairman.
Steve Knight, Treasurer.
Good evening and welcome. Councilor Tata.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everybody. Just a couple questions. And I think your letter that you submitted kind of explains some of this. But so it looks like you're spending $35,000 of your reserves this year. And I saw that what you said you like the buffer to be, and but that concerned me a little bit that you have to use that much of your reserves. And I know your state funding is still kind of uncertain. So can you just talk about that, about the decision to use the reserves and then what's going on with the state funding?
Definitely. Before I answer that question, I'm going to talk a little bit about our efforts. So as you know, we have been very successful with submitting grant applications. We were finally able to hold our annual wine tasting event, which many of you attended. Thank you, which was very successful. However, without the state funding, we still have seen some challenges. Steve, do you want to talk a little bit about us dipping into our reserves?
Well, as you see in the budget, we're looking for $50,000 from the state of Connecticut. And as you well know, they're in the state of still analyzing what they're going to fund and what they're not going to fund. So we looked at all our past history and what we've been able to raise. And if any of you that are in a nonprofit similar to this one, you'll know that grant funding for nonprofits is very, very competitive and getting more so every year. So in order to maintain the level of service and the level of staffing that we need to provide those services, we felt it necessary to actually dip into the reserves. We're hoping, of course we're hoping we don't have to. And if we have an exceptional year, then we will maintain our reserve levels. As I explained, or we explained in the letter to you, that we believe that the very minimum we need to hold is 6 months. That any well-managed nonprofit should have at least 6 months of reserves. And when some of that money is coming from government sources, probably 9 months is more, is more sensible. So I hope I've explained that.
Yeah, you did. So it sounds like if you do get the state money, then that would be the first line you wouldn't touch, right? If you're able to get that $35,000, then you won't have to dip into the reserve.
That would
correct?
that would certainly be ideal.
Yeah.
We will tell you that in past years, when we've gotten money from a government source that we didn't expect, we've had an informal agreement that we wouldn't take all 50,000, and I think we'd be willing to discuss that if the state funding comes through. If you all felt that we could take the 50,000 and not have to hit our reserves, that would be wonderful. That would be much appreciated.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Counselor Tata, if I could
Sure.
also add,
Yeah.
so we do, I mean, as you see in our budget, we may have to tap into reserves, but we are working on a strategic plan and with a consultant on a fund development plan. So we hope this is like a one-time, so that way we don't have to tap into our reserves.
Good. Yeah, I hope so. Because I didn't obviously nobody wants to do that, so that was a little worrisome. And then I also noticed that the request from Wallingford went up from 30,000 to 50,000. I assume that's also in relation to the state funding not occurring, correct?
Yes, just because that's still up in the air, and just we're really trying all our efforts to raise dollars, bring in money to continue our services and programming, but we just need a little more support to be able to provide the services at the volume that we're doing.
Sure.
And if I could just add to that, in years past, and this was as little as 4 years ago, we were receiving a very substantial amount from the state of Connecticut. And even prior to that, it varied. But, and it's, as you well know, if you ever deal with state, it's hard to even analyze where this money might come from. But we had an earmark that was pretty substantial and something we could, well, as much as you can with government, count on. That's disappeared. So now we're hand to mouth every time there's a state budget. So that's another reason that we've had to request more from the town.
Sure. Yeah, I was going to say, I remember when that was pretty substantial, what you used to get from the state. I recall that. And then the only other question I had, so I believe so you don't have rent, right? I believe you have the agreement with the town that you're able to use the building without paying rent, and then the STEM Academy is also in there, right? So I believe, so that agreement's for each of you, right? So there's no cost for you rent or to use the facility, correct?
So we lease the building for $1.
For $1, right? Yep, I remember the agreement, yeah. And same thing for STEM Academy,
Yes, they're
correct?
separate.
Okay, perfect. And then as far as I know, I think when we went for like a tour of the STEM Academy, you were talking about hopefully getting some sort of renovations on your side. Is there any request for that, or what's the status of that?
I believe I heard during the budget meeting that Rob, in the Public Works request, had put in some money for the Scout building with regards to the roof and
Yes.
pointing of the brick. So that's the exterior. We haven't necessarily heard anything with regards to the interior,
Nothing for the
though.
interior yet, okay. All right,
And
perfect.
if I just, I can't stop talking. They've done a wonderful job with the STEM area, which
Yeah.
I'm certain you've seen. We're not looking for that kind of renovation. As Jeff mentioned, it's the roof that needs work. So it's kind of basic.
Yeah, those are the projects that kill you, like you have to do them, but they don't look pretty, so. All right, thank you, that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Counselor Zandri?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. Mr. Knight, I just have a quick question. When you were talking about the $50,000, you had indicated that if the organization received money that you were planning to get from the state, that you would come back to us?
I think we would have to talk it over with, it's an informal agreement, we would hope not to. But if it's an informal agreement that we agree to, and we would revisit that at the time if the state does come through. We don't have that much faith in the state.
No, I was actually just going to suggest that, you know how things work up here from being here before.
Yeah.
I mean, if we've already kind of allocated this in the budget, and I would almost recommend to scour really any organization that was maybe in a fortunate situation if they end up getting what they need from a state or additional grant. If you came back to the council and said, look, we've got that informal agreement, but we also had this idea of a project or a plan that we could do now. If you kind of brought the plan forward, I think folks might be agreeable to hear it out. I mean, it kind of dovetails off the earlier conversations this year about, hey, if there are things that the different organizations do that are like multipliers for the town or for the people, I would rather see money we've already allocated to go to something like that than to draw it back in. So I mean, if you reach that point and you're like, we had this idea, it's going to cost us $20,000, but because we got X from the state, we've kind of got this available. What are your thoughts? Then you guys could discuss it internally. I'd rather see the organization put it to some use.
Well, we're
you.
happy to hear that. And to Councilor Tata's point, our budget does show that we're pulling $35,000 out of our reserves, which is maybe necessary, but it's hopefully not going to happen, going to have to happen. So perhaps that would be another reason to allow us to access all 50,000.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm just thinking out loud. I mean, my thought is, it's kind of like, not that I'm trying to think of an example that wouldn't sound bad. If I put an extra $500 aside for something and something cost me $300, and then there was something I didn't do because I was short and I've got extra cash, I might consider it. So I know that you didn't come forward and say, well, let's ask for more than what we need. Well, the idea would be if you get the money coming in from the state or some other avenue, some other grant, rather than having to go through an exercise of figuring out a way to gentleman's agreement it back, to say, listen, we've got this idea, we'd rather do this, and just kind of socialize it back. I'd rather see the organizations get some use out of it once they've already gone through the exercise.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Testa?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening.
Hi, Vinny.
Good evening.
I'm going to get philosophical here. When we talk about the whole concept, and you've been around, Steve, we talk about the whole concept of these town contributions to organizations. They involve many different ones. A baseball league, a soccer league, your organization, so forth. I think it really is a philosophical decision by the town to acknowledge that there's a value to the community that an organization is providing. And honestly, it's impossible to quantify it. It's impossible. So we get to a point where we say over the years, you know what, we can afford to, throw $3,000 to $5,000 to the little leagues, to the softball leagues, and that seems to be enough to keep them going, and then they work their tail off to raise money to really operate. But that town contribution is always that thing that keeps them above water, keeps them going. And if you had to justify it quantifiably, you couldn't. It's really just a matter of acknowledging that this is an organization that's, a large percentage of people in town are taking advantage of, and we want to encourage that and acknowledge that they're doing something. And most of what they do is funded, self-funded, volunteer funded, but the town's throwing a chunk in. So your organization, which, is so many times over in the reach of what you do versus a youth league or this league or that organization. And so I think that the value, if you will, of what the town is contributing sort of equates, you know where I'm going here. You know, I'm trying to go here anyway, right? So I think if we ever get to a point where we say, justify every dollar, you'll never be able to do that. You'll never be able to do that. But when we look at the mission, what you do, and the town says, okay, if this is relative to all the other things we do, this is what it takes to help keep you going. It also, in the town's contribution inspires the volunteer contributions. It tells the people out there, the businesses, the people that have charitable contributions to distribute. The town values this organization. The town acknowledges what this organization is doing for us. And that, in turn, hopefully leads to a snowball effect, right? So I would never question the dollar amount per se. I just, you know, I would just always thank you for what you do. You know, I teach at Lyman Hall, and I interact with so many students whose families benefit from your programs, and no one will ever have to convince me of any of the justification for all of this. I think it's just a matter of what can we afford, what can we do, and everybody agrees, yeah, we can do it. And I don't think we ever have to, hopefully we never have to justify it. But, oh my God, what a big but. Sorry about that. I do have a question. Can you just explain to me the relationship or the correlation between SCOW, if there's any, and this STEM Academy? Is it simply a matter of property use?
No, so Connecticut STEM Academy and SCOW have a long history. Before my time, I believe 2009, maybe, we welcomed them to SCOW to host programming, because we also wanted to work together to engage the community to participate in their after-school programs, their summer programs, and enrichments. Is it Young Astronauts?
I think it was Young Astronauts it started as,
Right.
and it developed into STEM.
Yeah.
And then since then, we've just worked together. So they worked out of one of the rooms at SCOW for almost a decade. So then when this opportunity happened, which we felt it was a great opportunity for them to bring more programs to the community, we thought that it was great, and we still partner and work together. They provide enrichment activities to our students and to the community, and I think that has been our relationship, and I mean, we're neighbors now, so.
And we continue to coordinate, so.
So I understand what they do. Is there a formal relationship between your two organizations?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
we're developing
Yes.
a hard copy of our relationship because they've recently become their own 501c3 and so forth. We've been their, what is the term, fiduciary
School sponsor?
co-sponsor up until now. Now they're, you know, they're flying on their own. So there's been a relationship that way. And I would mention one other thing, that they applied for a large grant from NASA, I believe it was. And it did have a component to it that NASA was looking for more participation from minority groups. And I think that by teaming up with SCOW, that gave them a real leg up on securing that grant.
Mr. Chairman, what do you mean by a formal, are you talking about between the Connecticut STEM Academy and SCOW?
Yes.
Yeah, there's not a formal relationship. If formal meaning, you know, a contractual or organizational tie. No.
Okay.
They are very much interactive and supportive of one another, but I don't want anyone to misconstrue that formal relationship would be some kind of contract or mutual governance or anything of that kind.
Well, that's why.
They are separate organizations.
Yes, and that's why I asked. I wanted to clarify that, and I appreciate that.
And we do share some expenses, we do share some staff. I mean, we just really work very well together, and we have been for the past almost 10 years. So it has really benefited SCOW, Connecticut STEM Academy, and the community.
Well, I mean, and I'll be totally upfront about where I'm coming from on this, because I just want a better understanding. And in my understanding at some point in time was that the STEM Academy was an extension of the school system to a certain extent, where it came from, and there was an understanding, or at least maybe it was a misunderstanding, that there was involvement with the school system, and it was a way of offering programming in STEM that was sponsored, at least, by the school system. And as time went on, I seemed to understand it wasn't. So I just want to clarify that it's an independent operation, separate from our school system, and works in your space in conjunction with you.
Yes.
Well, no, it...
Or not. I mean, help me out here.
Let me help here.
Yes.
Thank you.
It was never coming out of the school system. Chris Stone, who's the brainchild and director and leader, et cetera, it really was a program that he put together with Craig Turner. Craig Turner and Youth Service Bureau was the sponsor and still is. The area at SCOW is actually leased to the Connecticut STEM Academy. So it's in the same building, but it is a completely separate lease, and they have the lease. It's to be shared when either one of the programs needs additional space and there's time, et cetera. But there is a complete separate organization, and it never was originated within the school system. I think when the superintendent Sal Menza was here, he started a whole Moon program, and that's at the Fritz Elementary School now, and that really occurred after STEM was already functioning. So there's definitely a total separation here between these entities, but they all gain from one another by their proximity as well as the subject matter.
And if I may, just let me, because I've stepped in a little bit. The formal agreement I'm talking about that we want to have with them is really because we're sharing facilities.
Good.
And we have an understanding of, opening and closing and some of the shared, as Adriana says, some of the shared equipment.
No, that's fine. I hope none of what I'm saying is being inferred to be negative. I just want to understand.
No,
That's all.
not
so
at all.
The Connecticut STEM Academy is a private organization,
It is.
not related and it's not an extension of the school system that's doing amazing things, and working there. And that's fine. I just wanted to understand that. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilor Marone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any questions. I just want to say I have relationships with a few immigrant families in town, and I always ask them, do you know about SCOW? Do you have a relationship with SCOW? And inevitably they do. And so whatever you're doing for outreach, whether it's word of mouth or just the services you provide, I just appreciate, your contribution to our community. And I think it's money well spent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions from the public?
Mr. Chairman,
Mayor.
not a question, but I think I just want to raise one thing that came out during their budget presentation with the administration, and that is that I believe the number was 2 families, was it? 2 families per week? So 2 new families per week are contacting them and coming for help, services, whatever the issue might be. So that alone, regardless of programs, and that alone is a significant presence within the town and provides a great deal of comfort to all of us that we are responding in that way to people who need their assistance and direction. So that was key to my perception of what happens there and why we need them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There being no further business on our agenda, I'm going to end this experience, whatever you want to call it.